City Council, before we begin the official part of the proceedings, each Wednesday morning, we ask a question of the people in this room and the folks who watch this on TV. The question is, how are the children? The reason that we ask that question is because we know that when the children are well, the community is well. In some countries, when adults pass each other, rather than asking each other, how are you, they do ask, how are the children? What we do is we invite a person in each week to talk with us. And this morning we have a young woman named Nellie Kuitanen, and she's age 16 and goes to Reynolds High School. Nellie, could you please come forward? Thank you for being here, Nellie.
No problem.
So please tell the City Council on what you would like us to hear.
I live in a neighborhood and it's at 162nd, and I moved here from San Diego, California in 1999. And when I first moved there, it was a nice, serene place, but I don't know who was responsible, but someone put a methadone clinic right across the street, and that neighborhood just started falling apart, and it's just gone bad. It's gone from bad to worse. And I go to Reynolds High School, and that's the only high school in the Reynolds district, and it's a very, very big school. It's very crowded, and yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I think that says a lot. I was down visiting the legislature Monday and talking to them about the need for money for facilities because a number of schools in the state are growing and they need more school space. And it's awfully hard to have small classrooms when you have kids crowded in because there are no more classrooms to send them to. So I think that's a very important thing, and I appreciate you coming in and talking about it this morning. And you talked about the methadone clinic. Did you see that as sort of the problem with
Yes.
in the neighborhood, that was sort of the cause?
Yeah, most of my friends and my mom's friends don't, especially women, can't walk down the street without carrying like a pocket knife or something.
Wow. Well, I'm also the police commissioner, so I'll have a discussion with the police bureau about that. So thank you very much for coming in, Nellie.
No problem.
Let me give this young lady a hand. And thanks for the folks who brought her in. We appreciate that as well. City Council will come to order. Carla, please call the roll.
Adams? Leonard?
Here.
Saltzman?
Here.
Sten?
Here.
Potter?
Here. I'd like to remind folks that prior to offering public testimony to City Council, a lobbyist must declare which entity he or she is authorized to represent. Please read the communication.
Agenda item 139, request of Rachel Elizabeth to address council regarding the development process.
I'm hoping that Sam Adams can show up too, because it's a PDOT issue that it would be really nice for him to be here.
I saw him out in the hall.
Is he out in the hall?
I saw him.
Okay.
Could you
Do
see
you mind
if
if I-
he's
'cause I
available?
think-
We'll just
Thank
wait
you.
just a second.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's okay.
When you speak, would you please state your name for the record?
Yes.
And you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Rachel Elizabeth. I'm a mother, and I'm also a real estate developer. I own the Rexall building and a vacant lot on the corner of Mississippi and Shaver, and I've owned my building for 17 years. I'm here today to ask the mayor and the city council members to revoke the 2 building permits that were issued to the Mississippi Lofts. A third permit that pertains to the street frontage improvements has not yet been issued. These permits were issued on the basis of a private backroom deal between PDOT and the developer. This secret deal-making circumvented the public process and undermined the existing zoning code on the street. Code Title 17 requires that all new construction projects set their buildings back 2 feet from the lot line. This 2-foot dedication is critical because it allows us to have 12-foot sidewalks. Last summer at the Landmarks Commission hearing regarding the Mississippi Lofts, many neighbors, including myself, spoke of our concerns that the loft building was too big in its mass and scale and that it would overwhelm the 2-story streetcar-era buildings. I also talked about how important it is to have a sidewalk that's wide enough to accommodate street trees, cafe tables, strollers, wheelchairs, and lots of people. It's equally important to have a street that is wide enough to safely accommodate bicycles, cars, buses, and trucks. On Mississippi Avenue, we are fortunate to have a 40-foot wide street. It is precisely this combination of wide streets and alleys, along with a stunning array of streetcar-era buildings and a large inventory of vintage houses, that are the defining characteristics of the historic Mississippi Avenue Conservation District. Title 17 is the most elegant solution for infill development. What is the point of having design guidelines or codes if the city of Portland fails to enforce them, or if city bureaucrats set them aside arbitrarily? The Mississippi Lofts developers knowingly designed a building whose footprint is 2 feet too big. Their plans were originally denied by PDOT, and instead of redesigning and scaling back the building, Peter Wilcox, who is one of the developers, had a private meeting with Kurt Kruger, and what do you know? The Mississippi Lofts was granted an exception. And now a host of other developers are anxious to gain the extra free square footage for their projects too. The precedent has been set to ignore the code, the guidelines, and the neighbors. I want the city to stop making private deals with developers, and I want Title 17 enforced. That means a 2-foot setback from the lot line that extends the full height of the front of every new building on Mississippi. I have only like 3 more sentences. The land use review process has been set up to solicit neighborhood feedback. I do not understand why, in this case, a single planner decided to ignore huge neighborhood dissent and grant this project an exception to the zoning code setback requirement. Kurt Kruger of PDOT admitted he made a mistake. I don't want the city of Portland to approve a building permit that was the result of a mistake. I'm here today to urge the city to revoke the permits for this development and enforce Code Title 17 for every building on North Mississippi Avenue. Thank you.
Could I get a copy of your testimony? And we'll. Oh, it's right here. And is your contact information here?
No, but I'll give it to you.
That'd be great. And just clarifying, it sounds like you have a concern about the 2-foot setback, but you oppose the development beyond that as well?
I don't oppose the development beyond that. I just want everyone on my street to observe the 2-foot setback, because there's about 25 more buildings slated for being built in the next 2 years.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Is that the sole communication?
He's not even using his monthly anyways.
We move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to pull any item from the consent agenda? Does any person in this room wish to pull any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Please read the 9:30 time certain.
Agenda item 140, adopt budget adjustment recommendations and the minor supplemental budget for the fiscal year 2006-07 winter budget adjustment process and make budget adjustments in various funds.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Casey Short, Interim Financial Planning Manager, here to give you a brief synopsis of the winter bump and answer any questions. This is one of 3 periodic adjustments to the budget we make during the year. It's the smallest of the 3. It includes mid-year budget adjustments and performance reporting for halfway through the fiscal year. You'll see there's a good deal of performance reporting information in the winter bump analysis that was distributed to your offices last week, I believe, that you can go through on your own. I'm just going to talk today about the budget adjustments that are being requested in the winter bump and focus on the general fund. There are really no noteworthy actions in funds outside the general fund. There are 6 requests for draws on general fund contingency totaling $1,052,000. In addition, there's another $516,000 coming into the general fund, adding to contingency. That'll leave for the rest of the year a total of about $770,000 in the general fund contingency for a fund that's over $400 million. So it's thin, lasting through the rest of the year. Those are funds that are not otherwise spoken for. We have some things in reserve in the general fund contingency for specific items. I'll just quickly go through the 6 requests for draws on contingency, and then I'll be open to questions. There's a request from police for $314,000, adding 14 positions to civilianize background investigations and expedite the hiring process to get the process for hiring more police officers to run a little faster. There's a request from Commissioner Leonard, and I believe he wants to speak to this for support for the Rose Festival of $250,000. We have in the bump implementing action to appropriate an additional $200,000 to the Regional Arts and Culture Council pursuant to Council's action 2 weeks ago to match donations that are made to RAC. There are 2 items for staffing in BDS and in the Planning Bureau in response to the Measure 37 claims that came in the end of last year, right up against the deadline. And there's $82,000 for Project Respond. If there are any, well, before we get into questions, I'd like to see if anybody has anything to say. I think Commissioner Leonard was planning to say something about Rose Festival.
I was. I can do that now when I vote.
Okay. So that's my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Was there anybody signed up to testify on this?
No one signed up.
Okay. It's an emergency vote. Please call the roll.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
I learned that the quickest way sometimes is to have budget requests outside the city go away is to ask them to provide financial details about why they need the request and to specifically identify where in their budget they have a shortfall that requires city funds to make up the difference. I actually expected the Rose Festival when they made the request to respond, and they did, to my delight. And in fact, this $250,000, which I'm pleased each of us on the council are supporting, is helping the Rose Festival meet not just the goals it has as a signature event annually in Portland, but this is actually the 100-year anniversary of the Rose Festival. And because of that and a number of outstanding events that will occur, they've asked for us to help meet their budget goals this year, which I am very pleased to bring forward and to have the council support. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten? Aye. Potter?
Aye. Under the regular agenda, please read the first item.
Item 155, authorized settlement agreement regarding Fire Station 1 relocation.
Commissioner Sten.
Thank you, Mayor. This, just want to put on regular to, if there are any questions, this is the final settlement with the Portland Development Commission. Precedes many of the council members' time, but a few years back, PDC wanted to take a look at moving Fire Station 1 from its current location on Nadeau Parkway down a couple blocks to the Import Plaza block, and we explored that for several years. The Fire Bureau was more than willing to go along with that. It was essentially a decision that was not driven by any needs of the Fire Bureau, but was driven by a strategy PDC was working on to redevelop NATO Avenue. Excuse me. And the agreement that was signed between the Development Commission and the Fire Bureau essentially said that the Fire Bureau had a certain amount of money in the range of $12 million from the bond measure to redo the station. It was anticipated it would cost more to move it, and that if we explored moving it and for any reason the project did not happen, it was likely the inflated costs would exceed the $12 million or so that was in the bond. And so that's where we are today. And the Development Commission has agreed to pay the extra cost of the original project that really are come about because we've delayed and the price of steel and other things have gone up. So this is an amicable settlement. I think it's in line with what everybody agreed to on the front end. And at this point, it's I guess back to the future. We're going right back to where Station 1 is now and are going to get it rebuilt. There are still some questions about how to best integrate the station into Ankeny Plaza and a new Saturday market, and potentially, I think everybody remains committed, as does the Fire Bureau, to a revitalized part of the waterfront there. And we basically said we're going to pretty much leave the exterior plaza of the building up to the community planning process, and there's just a lot of different ways to configure that, and we're going to not move on that part of the project until PDC decides the future of the area, but we're going to hopefully be underway very soon on a seismic upgrade and revitalization that are frankly way overdue. And I had not planned that. Chief Clum is here. I imagine someone from PDC is here, but we had not intended to make a presentation unless there were questions.
Are there questions from the commissioners? Is there anyone signed up to testify?
No one signed up.
Is there anyone here who wishes to testify on this matter? Please call the vote.
Adams?
I think it's worth noting that this is one of the rare times when an issue or an idea with a lot of passion was pursued and given due diligence and was not moved forward. So I want to just thank you, Commissioner Stinn, and PDC, and everyone else involved, that there's a lot of due diligence done with this, and the decision was to not pursue the building of a new fire station, but to remodel the old. And I think that's unusual in the 14-odd years I've been here, and I just wanted to note it and thank you for it. Aye.
Leonard?
Well, one of the things I appreciate about this form of government is the kind of attention this issue got. Commissioner Stinn was, I had happened to know, because I have particular interest in this issue because of professional reasons, former professional reasons, was reluctant to agree to the move in the first place, built in some frankly, conditions, if it didn't go through, that I don't know that I would have thought to put in. And sure enough, at the end of the day, he was able to hold the PDC to an agreement that he had the foresight to make sure had what I felt like were excellent protections for not only the general fund and the city, but for the firefighters of Portland. I never was very emotionally enthusiastic about the move for purely selfish reasons. I hopefully can envision myself one day walking along the waterfront as a little old man and pointing to people at the building and saying that's where I got hired as a firefighter, and versus saying that's where the Fire Bureau used to be. Now it's this other place. I'm really happy that it's staying there, and I'm enthused by the plans I've seen for the remodel, and I think. All in all, this is an excellent example of how Portland works currently. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Stinn?
Well, I just want to be clear that as much as I like the notion that at that point, I think former Commissioner Leonard's walk was not part of the decision-making process. And I did want to just say explicitly, and I want to thank Mayor Potter because he really helped me get through this piece, is that the decision not to proceed was strictly financial on PDC's part. It was too expensive, and at some point you have to say, great idea, but just not worth the money, and that's, I think, what Mayor Potter helped me in saying. So this is the last chapter in this one, I hope, and glad to vote aye.
Potter?
And I support this because I think in the long run, it not only serves the citizen better, but I think it's going to save the city money to use in other areas that we can help redevelop area of our Old Town and River District that really need the help. So I vote aye. Please read the next item.
Item 156, amend city's 2007 legislative package and authorize the Office of Government Relations to support state legislation designed to enhance the collective bargaining rights of public safety personnel by allowing them to bargain issues exclusively related to their safety, which may include staffing levels.
Commissioner, did you want to take the lead?
Please. Thank you, Mayor. Anybody watching, as some of our wonkish citizens are apt to do, the council agendas the last couple of weeks must be scratching their head trying to figure out the various iterations that this proposed resolution has taken. And I think it's important for the public to understand and for me to explain how this last iteration has evolved to the point that it has. I originally wrote a resolution about 3 weeks ago that said that the city of Portland would amend its legislative package to actually endorse and support a specific piece of legislation in the legislature that purports to give the rights to firefighters and police officers the ability to bargain, to talk about with their employer issues relating to their safety as it is impacted by staffing levels. For a variety of reasons, I know that is a real issue. I've been to a number of firefighter and police officer deaths in my career directly relating to the lack of appropriate levels of staffing, and it's something I feel strongly about. When I began shopping that around, as one is want to do when you want to pass something here in the building, two of my colleagues agreed to sign on, in addition to myself. A fourth said that he could support it if the wording was changed from supporting the legislation to staying neutral. I've been in the legislative process much longer than just my tenure on the council. And so I look for collaboration and compromise and support where I can. And based on that conversation, I went back and rewrote the resolution to say that the city of Portland would stay neutral on the issue of this specific legislation currently in the legislature being debated that allows firefighters and police to bargain over their safety. I met with the mayor. The mayor expressed to me he could not support that. And so with four co-signers, it went forward to last week's agenda to be discussed. One of the original supporters of my proposal happened to be out of town that day. The mayor was out of town as well, so there were three of us here. When one of the original co-sponsors said on reconsideration he could not support the legislation, I may be a lot of things, but not having the ability to count is not one of them. I realized I didn't have 3 votes. So I came to the council and basically said that I was going to withdraw the resolution pending this week, and that I intended at that point to have a resolution before council that actually did what I wanted to do in the first place, support efforts by firefighters and police officers to be able to talk to their employers about their safety. In that debate, in what ended up to be a debate, Chief Rosie Sizer came forward, and I think she's here today. If I'm not, there she is behind a pillar, and made some observations about what it was in particular she was concerned about in the bill, in the legislature. I don't agree that was an interpretation that I could agree with. But notwithstanding that, her concerns specifically here were not that firefighters and police could bargain about their safety, that she, in essence, thinks that's an important thing for employees to be able to do, to bargain actually about life and death issues that may affect them in their workplace. But rather, the bill had been written in such a way as to actually go further than allowing firefighters and police to bargain their safety, but also bargain things such as transfers and routine personnel decisions that may impact workload, that are management and not safety issues. Again, I didn't necessarily agree with that interpretation, but I listened. And again, with the idea of trying to find cooperation and collaboration, I left that council meeting, worked closely with Commissioner Sten, who frankly is more objective about this issue than I, and helped me craft what you see before you today. And I want to make sure that we today are debating what this says and not what somebody thinks this says, or not something that was written 2 weeks ago, or not some bill in Salem. We are debating a resolution that says that we support, as a council, the rights of public safety personnel to bargain issues, and I'm quoting, exclusively related to their safety, which may include staffing levels. One of the whereases, I won't read the whole resolution, but one of the whereases that Commissioner Stand helped me craft to address the concern raised by Chief Sizer here a week ago today says this: whereas assignments, transfers, and other routine personnel decisions made by management are not safety issues. In other words, this council will not support legislation that is written that it gives the rights to firefighters and police officers to bargain over issues such as transfers or workload issues. This has been written narrowly to only give support by this council of efforts in the legislature to pass legislation that would allow a firefighter or police officer to talk to their employer and not be charged with violating the collective bargaining law about those issues that could affect whether or not they go home at the end of their shift, which I think is fair and right, and I would hope each of us here would agree is an important thing for us to embrace. So I hope that this discussion today confines itself to what this actually says and not something else. Thank you.
Mr. Stan, did you want to? Okay.
Can we
Yes.
hear from
I want to hear from
Director of Human Resources and the Police Chief?
Director of Human Resources, Chief, also City Attorney, and well, I guess we'll have Ken Rust after that.
Okay. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. This feels a little bit like deja vu all over again, so I'm going to be somewhat redundant in what I had to say last week, but recognize there are two members who weren't here last week.
And I hope you also recognize this is not the same resolution we discussed last week.
I guess I'm a little bit confused, and I applaud your effort to tailor a resolution more closely to what you want it to say. But essentially, what we're talking about is a bill at the legislature that may, at some point, if it passes, become labor law in the state of Oregon. So,
well, Chief Sizer, with all due respect, we are not debating that. We are debating resolution number 156. We're not debating a bill in the legislature. And what this resolution speaks to is specifically the issues I just outlined. And if the bill in Salem does the things that you testified to last week, we do not support that.
Well, Commissioner Lane, with all due respect, we're talking about a resolution that directly affects a position we take in our legislative agenda. So if we could let the Chief speak to her concerns about what could become labor law in Oregon, I would appreciate it.
okay, and I'll just quote the bill. I'm sorry, Commissioner, but it covers staffing levels and safety issues that have a potential impact on the on-the-job safety and the workload of employees. The Portland Police Bureau has two bargaining units that are strike prohibited. The Portland Police Association, covering officers, sergeants, detectives, and criminalists, and the Portland Police Commanding Officers Association, covering lieutenants, captains, and commanders. Similarly, the bill will cover dispatchers and call takers at the Bureau of Emergency Communications, and in the county, corrections officers in the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Senate Bill 400 would cover an enormous breadth of the issues undertaken by the Portland Police Bureau. These issues include, but are not limited to, the uniforms we wear, the vehicles we drive, and other equipment to include lethal and less lethal weapon systems. Much of the training that police officers receive, the creation or dissolution of divisions, staffing levels within each Portland Police Division and on each shift, staffing levels for a variety of tactical operations to include search warrant and CERT operations, and a variety of policies to include the Police Bureau's use of force policy. Senate Bill 400 is being portrayed as an expression of concern for safety. Providing a safe work environment for employees is already an inherent and critical part of our decision-making process and a top priority. In my 22-year career with the Portland Police Bureau, with one possible exception, I cannot recall a safety-related concern that was not immediately addressed through a safety committee or through cooperation between management and labor. The one possible exception is the current 800 megahertz radio system, which has several dead spots within the boundaries of the city of Portland, and these dead spots have not been resolved, although not through lack of effort. No radio system is flawless, even the most expensive. And I would have you witness the over $600 million radio system that's being proposed for the state of Oregon in the governor's budget. You might be interested to know that the vast majority of safety incidents testified about in the Senate committee hearing on Senate Bill 400 occurred or were framed around the State Department of Corrections. If there is a problem with the DOC, shouldn't the resolution be to fix the DOC? Similarly, other testimony around this bill framed it as a vehicle for getting more cops on the street. I heartily support that, but also recognize through the budgeting process, more cops on the street mean lesser municipal services in other areas. Under current state law, if a collective bargaining agreement is in effect, no unilateral change in a mandatory subject of bargaining may be made unless agreement is reached at the bargaining table or 90 days have passed. Senate Bill 400 would require bargaining of the aforementioned items or issues or delay in the implementation past 90 days. As one labor leader told me last week, demand to bargain letters would be flying if Senate Bill 400 is passed. Some of the issues may result in binding arbitration based on labor associations and management's last best offer. One thing that has been made clear to me during my tenure as police chief is how difficult it is to effect change. Change is difficult even under current labor law. Change would be more difficult under a new law. Change would come more slowly and probably at greater cost. And finally, I would like to make very clear that I am not anti-union. I have been a member of a labor union virtually my whole adult life. I like Robert King and respect his role as president of the Portland Police Association. I believe the City Council can identify many and different ways to show its support for their public safety personnel rather than to support Senate Bill 400. I believe the bill is too broad in its current state for the City of Portland.
I guess, Chief, this is deja vu because I don't think this panel heard what I said last week, and I assume it's because I was inarticulate. The challenge I tried to present last week was one that I think the political reality is that this bill is likely to pass in Salem. As I've listened to both sides, I've heard both sides say that they don't believe the extremes are likely to happen, and they also don't believe that the extremes should happen, which are two different things. What I continue to hear from our side on management is a list of coulds. This could happen, that could happen, the other thing could happen. Well, another thing that could happen is it's going to pass. And so what I said last week was, and that has nothing to do with whether this council weighs in or not. I mean, let's cut to the chase. I mean, the Salem is not on hold to see what our position is on this issue. They don't care that much. The votes are being waged in different ways. So what I tried to frame last week was, could we come up with a scenario that perhaps we could present as a united front with our management and labor in the tradition of Portland labor management that tried to parse this down a little bit, tried to clarify. And it appears that nobody put any effort into that the effort was to come in with another list of of how the sky could fall. And so Randy and I did write up a resolution that does not say we support Senate Bill 400 written as it is. It says we would support a bill that got to what we think the heart of the fire and police unions' legitimate arguments are. And frankly, I think some of the pieces that they probably successfully push right now in arbitration is just not lined up, but limit at least the majority of coulds that you put forward. And with all due respect, to hear the list again doesn't really get me anywhere. I get that those things could happen under 400. I think this council is passing on a chance to try and weigh in with a more thoughtful approach that perhaps we could all bring unanimously. But it appears that the goal is to have the debate that's going to happen in Salem anyway. So, I mean, that leaves me having to figure out a way to vote on this exactly, but that had been my hope, was that we could come in and say, here's some ways that we would recommend changing this bill. I mean, as it is now, you're playing this like an arbitration. With all due respect, Ms. Deckard, you're playing it a win or lose, and 400 passes, the sky falls. That's what you're arguing. If it doesn't pass, we stay where we are. Well, the argument that I'm looking for in this resolution is what is some middle ground on this thing. And, I don't think staffing levels, I don't think workload levels, I don't think the routine transfers, I don't think Robert was lying when he said he didn't intend to grieve those, and I don't think he was lying when he said that since you don't intend to grieve those, if we could work on amending the legislation to clearly exclude those, he wouldn't mind. And he said, no, I wouldn't. So, but instead we're basically coming in and saying, okay, we don't want to amend this thing at all. We don't want to do any work on it. We just want to do this list of all the things that could happen. And so that's my frustration.
That's a clarifying question for you, Linda. I just want to confirm through your eyes what I see in that this particular resolution and I was gone last week, that is before us, takes a position on an issue. It does not take a position on a House bill or a Senate bill. Do you agree with that interpretation?
Yes, I think that's clear in the resolution, that it's not directed at a particular bill. I mean, someone could take it and use it, I suppose, in lobbying effort to support some bill or other, but it doesn't take a position on a bill.
And to be clear on that point, Commissioner Adams, I wrote this with Commissioner Sten thinking that it would be used as a tool by a government relations staff to draft amendments to Senate Bill 400 to address the very concerns you raised last week, Chief Sizer. So I'm just disappointed to hear what I'm hearing today, because this was drafted actually to restrict it more than what it was originally drafted to do, which was originally to actually support Senate Bill 400. This has been dramatically changed to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing and we're not having disagreements that aren't healthy. And I don't think this is a healthy disagreement, because I think we're having two complete conversations. We're having a conversation about Senate Bill 400 as it's written, and I'm having a conversation about a resolution that essentially empowers the city to amend Senate Bill 400 to take out the concerns that you raise.
And Linda, do you agree, in addition to what you just said in the first answer to my question, that that is also a scenario in which this legislation, this particular resolution, could be used to help amend the bill in Salem?
I mean, and that's a government relations matter, but I certainly believe that, they would take it and use it as directed by the council, as expressing the council's position.
I would like to weigh in on this matter as the police commissioner. I'd like to go to the issue that was at the core of this, and that's around officer safety. The Portland Police Bureau does have a safety committee that is composed of rank and file and management that looks at safety issues for Portland police officers. There is also regular meetings under labor management committees between administration and unions over all issues. The current law, that the way it is constructed at the state level, is that there is requirement for a substantial and direct impact on the safety of employees. What the state law does, and it's not addressed by this resolution, is that it changes the bar. It moves it from substantial and direct, which means now, to one that has a potential impact on safety or workload. I wanted to just, I looked up the word potential because I thought that's an interesting word that's been used to describe this new bar. And the first definition under potential was that it's possible as opposed to actual, that it's not existing, but it has the possibility to exist. That's a different bar than saying that there's a substantial and direct impact. And that was one of my major concerns with this particular legislation, is that it changes the bar in terms of what is a requirement for the city and the unions to bargain. All of this is based on a basic question, is there a problem currently in the city of Portland with the issue of safety of fire or police officers? I have not heard it. So in terms of how it affects the city of Portland, I think that because it changes the bar for bargaining, that it will impact the city of Portland. And that's where my concern lies. So it, to me, is not an issue of safety. We take care of our people. Yes, there is an issue with the 800 system. We are in the process of working across all the bureaus of the city to try to come up with a comprehensive solution to our communications, public safety communications. And in fact, we're going to be making quite a large investment in it. And so even that is being addressed. But it is a money issue, and is also being able to develop an effective, collaborative, interoperable system. And that's the goal, and that's where we're moving towards. So from my perspective, this isn't just about the particular resolution. It's also the other part of the only legislation I'm aware of, which are two, House Bill 2404 and Senate Bill 400, that go to this specific issue, and a subsection which changes the bar from substantial and direct impact, which is an actual event, to a potential impact, which is one that is possible but not actual. So I'm concerned that this places the city in jeopardy in terms of its ability to negotiate fairly and honestly with its unions.
At the risk of repeating myself for the fourth time, this resolution does not weigh in on any particular legislative bill. This resolution states a position by the city that can actually be used to craft amendments to address the very concerns you just raised, Mayor Potter.
The League of Cities has actually crafted an amendment to, rather than as bargaining, is to require sit-down discussions between labor and unions at least every 3 months.
Well, why don't you just extend that to wages and holidays and vacations? What's the difference? We're nice to our employees. They don't need a pesky collective bargaining law.
What is the problem we're solving?
Exactly.
I'm asking you is what is the
problem?
Well,
let me just say, it is when you have the right to collectively bargain in the private sector, there are no restrictions such as we're discussing here. Electricians, carpenters, laborers sit down and bargain on any subject. It is only in Oregon public employee collective bargaining law that there are any restrictions at all on anything that can be talked about. That is unusual. What this resolution seeks to say is to allow public employees, police officers and firefighters, in Portland to sit down and talk about only those issues that relate to their safety exclusively, and does not include, by the words of this resolution, which I hope you've actually read, Mayor Potter, that does not include assignments or transfers or routine personnel decisions made by management and are not safety issues. That's what it says. You're debating Senate Bill 400.
No, I'm debating you, because what you're saying is that there's a problem. This allows for the police unions to sit with management. They already do that. They've got
Mayor
safety
Potter,
committees. They've got labor management committees. We've got a state statute that provides for that.
Mayor Potter, let me point out something to you. Portland isn't synonymous with the state of Oregon. We may have good relationships with our employees, but this is a bill in the legislature that affects every jurisdiction from the southeast corner to the northwest corner of the state and every point in between, that those employees don't enjoy the same relationship with their councils or their fire districts or their sheriff's office that our employees do. I hope you understand that this is a bill that affects firefighters and police throughout Oregon, not just Portland, Oregon.
Well, you should have crafted it rather than saying this is about our unions being able to sit down with the police and fire.
I should have crafted what?
That. But initially, that's how you started out, by saying this is about public safety. This is about protecting our officers and firefighters.
Yes, it is, that they have the right to talk about it.
And that they have a right to talk about
Yes.
it. So what does this solve for Portland?
It codifies in statute from this point on, if this council changes and that union leadership changes, that employees have the inherent right to sit down and talk with their managers, their employers, about issues that could affect their safety, which I think is a fundamental human right, not just a right firefighters and police should have.
And you're saying that the current statute does not provide for that?
Obviously not. There's a bill to change it.
Well, I mean, the current law says you can negotiate.
Then why do you oppose changing the statute along the lines I've outlined?
Because
if you think it's already there.
Because the word potential is a much more creative
You're debating Senate
word.
Bill 400. That we're debating this resolution. This resolution says not potential.
Well, I think it's,
But I think that's the issue at play.
I think it's important to go back to the context of how one raises these issues. Because they can't strike, police and fire have to go to binding arbitration. All this allows them to do, if you take out, and this is what I'm focused on, as the fire commissioner, I don't fear them bringing up anything. Anything that an employee thinks is a potential to their danger, if they can take it through their union process and they believe it's serious enough to bring to the bargaining table, I want to hear it. I don't want to assume that Chief Brando's thought of everything, and certainly not me. I think we want to hear it. What this allows them to do is to take a potential issue and bring it to the bargaining table. What is the end result of that bargaining table? The end result of the bargaining table is a very, very risky arbitration if we can't reach agreement. And I have no reason to believe in the real world that the fire and police unions are going to bet their whole arbitration on the kind of things that you guys are lining up, because arbitration is an either-or category. Now, the danger based on this, unless you fear the discussion of somebody saying, I want to call this potential safety, and think an arbitrator is not going to see through something that is not, is if they can bring this into day-to-day transfers and other pieces and grieve things based on the contract language to basically make it hard to run the Bureau. That is the issue. I am yet to actually hear it. Mayor, you're the first time I've heard anybody argue the argument aggressively that they don't want to hear potential issues. I haven't heard the chief say that. I haven't heard the chief of the fire say that. I haven't heard the League of Cities say that. What I've heard people say is, here's a laundry list of things that could happen on a day-to-day basis if this passes, which is why I was trying to get at last week the question of, is there a way to agree? And I've heard the unions agree that that's not the issue. But given the fact that you can bring up a potential issue in a debate, I mean, it should not scare us, because if we are right on our analysis, if we are right and the officers are safe, we will prevail at arbitration. It's not like if they can bring it up, they can suddenly impose something. They have to make an overall argument on a package. And if you're risky in a package, you're not going to win the package. And so I really think that this is, the danger in the Senate Bill 400 would be in the disruption of the day-to-day ability to manage it. We should not fear giving employees room to talk about things in a broad arbitration or in a broad negotiation that takes place every 3 years, and at the end of the day is about their work conditions.
It seems like, in my experience on 9 years on the council, negotiations include a laundry list of items. Every time a contract comes up, there's many, many items that are being negotiated. And this is going to sort of, in my opinion, open it up for more potential issues. And so people put in issues knowing they're not going to get anywhere on them, but that they become takeaways and things that get you to a settlement. And so that, that's the concern I have, is that we're adding a potential whole another laundry list of issues related to potential impacts. And I wanted to ask Yvonne Deckard, because you wrote to us on February 9th a memo concerned about, again, House Bill 2404, for example, saying these are issues that could raise a demand or a grievance for bargaining, such as redeploying school police officers could be challenged as potentially increasing officer workload for those officers who don't respond to schools. And more important to me is the impact on return to work programs. I mean, 80% of the voters just recently weighed in. They want to see, among other things, more aggressive return to work policies. And you're concerned here that there's a potential, or that it could be argued by the police association that return to work essentially endangers the safety of officers by putting people in jobs that aren't fully capable of performing at the level of non-disabled police officers. So I wanted to ask you, those concerns, you still have those concerns, and I wanted to ask you also the language that was added to the resolution, whether that mitigates any of your concerns about those type of scenarios, interfering with return to work policies or redeployments.
Yvonne Deckard, Director for the Bureau of Human Resources. The way the bill is written today, the terminology potential impact on safety or workload, I agree with the chief, is very broad. And whether we're in contract negotiations, certainly when we're in contract negotiations, issues come up and we vet them through negotiations. But if the type of programs that you're talking about or that I've mentioned in this memo would certainly occur outside of contract negotiations, what it would mean is that the union would still be able to give us a demand to bargain for it before we could implement, even though we're not into contract negotiations. So we would, once we get a demand to bargain, under the current language, the way the bill is written, we would have an obligation to bargain, and we would have an obligation to bargain potential impact, and we would have an obligation to bargain over workload and staffing, as well as safety. I heard, I was here last week and heard, Robert's testimony, and what I know is that anytime we've gone to contract negotiations, if safety issues have come up, we've never refused to bargain over those, whether it's during contract negotiations or not. Commissioner Stin is correct. Any issues that have come up, we've been able to bargain over them. When you have programs like Return to Work, Robert is very reasonable, and I haven't had a lot of experience with Ken Burns, but my experience with Ken is that he's very reasonable. But they also have e-boards, they have memberships, they have an obligation to represent. And Ken or Robert or Susan Skites, as far as 911 may decide as a union rep, that is not something that they want to bring forward. But their e-board could ask them to bring it forward anyway, or their membership could ask them to bring it forward anyway, and they would be obligated to do so.
Can I focus you in right there on what you said? Because I think that I'm not sure that there's dispute over the primary statement you just made, which is that were the bill to pass, it could force you and management to bargain over transfers, routine transfers, assignments, and workloads. That's why I continue to see that one of the opportunities that this council has that appears to be passing on in favor of the broad rhetoric that's going on in both sides down there would be to bring our police union and our fire union, which are the biggest in the state, into a unified position with us that says we could support legislation if it nailed all the things that are in your memo and took them off of consideration. And I haven't had the long conversation with Ken, but have had the conversation with Robert to say that is not their intent. And so I guess I'm not going to repeat myself again. That's what I was hoping for last week, was to try and, it's my personal political prediction that this bill is going to pass. It's my personal political prediction that's going to pass whether or not this council weighs in either way. It's also my personal sense that if this council and its unions, which would be the only one in the state that's coming in lockstep, came in and said, you know what, we're not as scared about people putting potential safety issues on the table because, you know what, we let them do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. What we are scared of is this laundry list of what ifs, and we've got a couple of sentences here that we're presenting jointly with fire and police unions that clarify that that is not the intent. I think we'd have a shot at passing that because I think that the two sides probably could get the bill amended. I doubt the two sides splitting are going to change the fate of the bill. And so that again is my intent in sponsoring this resolution, which, you know, I think was probably not as clear as I intended it to be based on today's conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Stan, I was asked to comment on the bill as it's written, and that's what I've done in this memo. You know, if
you've done that articulately, and I think that I agree with many of your points.
Right, and if the city through governmental relations worked on an amendment to the bill, until I see that amendment, you know, I'm not sure what the impact of that would be. But if we were working to amend the bill the way in the direction that I hear that the conversation is going, then that would represent certainly a different scenario for the city. So right now, I'm commenting on the bill as it's written today and what the impact would be on the city if that was to pass as is.
Well, and I just, you know, I could be. There feels to be, and it's not your fault, there feels to be a little bit of a circle going on, and I'll be quiet because I just have a premonition that Dan Bates is going to call you and say, what would that sentence look like?
Well, and if that happened, I could certainly and would be certainly willing to sit down and work with Dan on what that sentence would look like, and then council has to decide if that's the direction that they want to go. But my phone right today, no one's called. I'm only faced with the language as it exists right now, and so that's the only thing I can deal with is what's in front of me.
I wanted to ask Chief Sizer, have you encountered any concerns from the union about return to work policies to date? I mean, we are, I know, under Mayor Potter's leadership, getting more aggressive about that. Have there been any concerns expressed about the safety of street officers because of using officers with some form of disability in the workplace?
No, I haven't. And we've identified positions for them where any physical limitations would not have an impact on them nor any street officers. So that has gone very smoothly.
And I wanted to ask Linda Ming, the whereas that Commissioner Leonard and Sten added says, whereas assignments, transfers, and other routine personnel decisions made by management are not safety issues. Does that have, if we pass this, does that have any policy impact vis-a-vis us and our bargaining units?
As opposed to in Salem? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Between current statute and proposed change?
Well, okay, you know, let's say something passes in Salem, but we have gone on record with this resolution. Maybe if we took the whereas and made it a resolved, does that give us, and I'd want to hear from the unions about this before we would do something like that, but does that give us sort of this is the council's position, that these issues are not safety issues, realizing that, you know, whatever happens in Salem could interfere with that ultimately, but
I don't believe it would change the meaning of the statute. If the statute passed with the current broad language in the statute, I don't think the council's interpretation of that language in a resolution would have any impact on the way the courts would interpret that statute or the arbitrators would interpret that statute when it was being enacted. The council can't create legislative history for a state statute.
No, I understand. I guess I'm just saying when we sit down at the table, could we use this as a policy statement? Realizing that once it gets out of our hands into the courts, who knows?
You could probably use it. I'm not sure it would take you very far.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Saltzman, if you're asking whether or not, if I'm sitting at the bargaining table and I say what council's policy is is not to have us negotiate over assignments, transfers, routine personnel decisions, and therefore we're not going to talk about it, I would imagine we get a ULP. I would imagine we get an unfair labor practice, because the state statute would give the unions the right to talk about it, and we would have to talk about it. And so, does that answer?
Yeah, that answers the question.
Further questions?
Well, I only want to mention one other thing that, weighs in my mind on this. And I do appreciate the new whereas, but I also realize that this is, this is an issue, as I think Commissioner Leonard states, will affect every police and firefighter throughout the state of Oregon. It will also affect every government, every governing body throughout the state of Oregon that has police and fire responsibilities. And, I can't help but, I think we've talked a lot in this council about recognizing we are, part of the state, as opposed to that old familiar city of 500,000 or more people that always gets carved out of state legislation, and that we need to work consistently with our colleagues throughout the state. And right now, you pick up the paper every day, all you're hearing about is how Josephine County and Douglas County are shutting down libraries and losing 68% of their general fund due to federal tax payments for timber receipts going away, expired. The League of Oregon Cities has together strongly opposed the legislation 2404 and 400, as have police, fire, and chiefs throughout the state, and sheriffs as well. So I have to weigh what position we take on a resolution that kind of touches on those bills with what I feel is sort of a consistent position that we have to demonstrate if we're truly serious about saying, Portland is part of the rest of the state of Oregon, and we want to work together on issues. So
well, I guess on that, Commissioner, I just want to be clear in the record that, I'm not going to let that stand undebated. I've actually been on the phone with the president of the League of Cities, on whose board I served 3 times this morning, trying to talk through compromise language. They recognize that that we have a duty to work with our unions as well as theirs, and that we do have a different situation in terms of how we bargain things. And so, it's in flux. They're pushing and pulling. I wouldn't say there's agreement, but the idea that if we do in fact take a different position than the League of Cities board, that signals that we're not serious about working with the rest of the state is inflammatory and not accurate.
Further questions for these 3 folks? Thank you. How many people are signed up to testify?
We have 2 people signed up, Ken Burns and Amanda Fritz.
As Ken is coming up, I would like to announce that this is his maiden appearance before the council since being elected president of the Portland Firefighters Association last December, and so I want to recognize that and welcome Ken to City Council.
Appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, council members, I appreciate you taking the time today to discuss this important resolution. Senate Bill 400, or let's just call it the safety bill from now, as I see maybe a variance of that resolution coming down, is really about communication. This bill allows safety issues to be discussed at the bargaining table. The City of Portland has already demonstrated the importance of communication, safety, and partnership between city officials and public safety officers. Portland Fire has 4-person on every apparatus, key to safety. We're working, as funds become available, for radios for all members. We're working towards a 4th district to help in accountability. Through processes like our Safety Committee, Labor Management Committee, Portland has become a leader in the state of how to communicate effectively between management and labor. Unfortunately, not every city has the processes that Portland has to discuss those safety issues. This is actually an opportunity for Portland to once again take the lead, and by supporting Senate Bill 400 or a version of that makes safety a key component of bargaining, we're doing the right thing. We need to support safety for for all emergency responders throughout the state. It's not just about Portland Fire. Senate Bill 400 does not obligate anyone. It does not impose the union's will on anyone. It simply provides the groundwork for discussions regarding safety issues. It does not affect the last best offer, and it does not affect the ability to pay. For those cities who are less fortunate financially than we are, who can't afford 4 persons on an apparatus, that this bill will not make them wake up one morning and have to double and quadruple their size of personnel. The financial cost has to be available for the city to absorb that cost. Thus, the ability to pay is an important part to remember. In closing, this bill makes sense. The men and women who are on the streets risking their lives have a right to have a discussion regarding safety during their bargaining process. For those cities such as ours who are already having those decisions, this bill has no effect. We will continue labor management process, safety committee. We will continue doing the right thing. For the other cities who have been unwilling to discuss safety issues, this will merely provide the groundwork for that discussion to occur. It does not impose the union's will. It merely lays the foundation for a discussion regarding safety. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions regarding our position on this measure.
I have one, Ken, and recognizing you're new, I would just like to ask you what the current law is in regards to direct and substantial impact versus potential. How do you see the difference playing out both here in Portland and around the state?
Here's what I would say is that there's a potential impact for a firefighter to get hurt on every call he goes on. It's one day someone wakes up and says, I think we should put 2 people on a fire engine instead of 4. Well, they haven't went on a call yet, so they haven't got hurt yet. As soon as they go on a call and they try to save someone's life, but they don't have the manpower or the backup, and they get hurt. Well, the potential was there, but until they respond on the call, you can't prove it. So the potential is important. One can theorize that 1 person on a fire engine would not be satisfactory in the way of safety. 4 is better than 1. So the idea of potential, one might think, well, the potential was there. Someone else might not think so until after the accident occurred. So one's cause and effect, in my opinion.
Well, the actual wording is substantial and direct impact, which is a different, I assume you would know that that's a different bar than potential in terms of bringing an actual issue to negotiation.
Right. Well, I totally agree with that, and that's why I gave the extremes of the potential. Substantial is going from 1 person to from 4 person to 1. That's a pretty substantial difference. The potential would be, say, you went down to 3. It's a potential, but not a substantial. It's not a bigger gap, and that's, to my definition, that's the difference we're looking there for. One's a potential, and one's substantial. Substantial is probably more likely. But to allow the conversation doesn't obligate anybody. The conversation can be about, is this substantial or is this potential? Without the conversation, we never get to what the true impact could or would be.
Are you aware of fire departments around the state that when they feel like they have a substantial or direct impact on the safety of their folks, that they're not allowed to discuss it with their jurisdiction?
I believe that most local departments are doing the right thing. What happens is there's the ability to have that conversation makes everybody's relationships better. We can have it in a safety committee meeting, and that's okay, but we can't have it at the bargaining table. And why would that be?
Are you aware of any fire department around the state that is not allowed to discuss substantial or direct impact of safety to fire personnel?
I believe once they can get an agreement to the word substantial, then the conversation exists. But that's the debate. Is it substantial or is it potential? And that's the debate that happens before we can even talk about it. And without talking about it, how do we find out whether it's substantial or potential without having that conversation? I believe this legislative bill is going to be helpful in communicating and creating partnerships between labor and management. I think for the most part, that happens in our state. But I think this bill will give everybody an understanding that the conversation should take place.
Are you talking about this resolution today or the bills in Salem?
I came prepared today to talk about the bill in Salem. Safety is paramount to me. I would agree that transfers per se from one station house to the other, for a specific example, should not be part of this collective mandatory bargaining process. Again, if I transfer to one person transferred to a fire station all by themselves, then that transfer should be, because it's different than going from one 4-person house to another 4-person house. If we build a new station and we're going to send one person up there, that transfer should be discussed as a safety component.
Just one person total?
Correct. That's what I'm talking about. Is that
you mean going from a 4-person to a 1-person?
Right, because transfers is broad. When I say transfer, I can say, okay, I want everybody walk over there. You were all transferred. If only one person walks over there, it's still a transfer. So the conversation would still take place under the idea of safety, not the transfer itself.
The police chief was asked about the specific program, the return to work, that if the police union had any concerns about that. I'd like to ask you the same question in terms of the fire union regarding the return to work program.
I wasn't prepared to answer those questions, but if I would love to. And that is that I've met several occasions, several meeting more than 3, and I've been trying to get answers to fairly complex questions. And maybe you've seen them. I've provided Ron McGee, I've provided our fire chief with a list of questions that we needed to get answers to gain our full support of the return to work program. One of them that is the most concerning, and there's several, and I'd love to meet with you privately and discuss all of them, but as a member falls off a roof. He's got a hurt back. He's disabled. He's been disabled for 7 years. His back periodically flares up on him. His doctor okays him for the return to work program. He comes back. Now he does some inspections for 5 or 6 years. When he retires, is his back, the medical treatment for his back injury, going to be covered? And I would ask you, do you know the answer to that question?
I've never heard the question before, so I'd have to look at it. I'm not the fire commissioner.
Okay.
But I would like to meet with you in regards to that. I thought that they did prepare a response to you.
I've got a response to my 9 questions, but the key component is if someone gives up their bodily ability to live their life and then they come back to a return to work program, as I understand it, by the fact that they return to work, then at time of retirement, their medical condition would not be covered. And yes, our union has concerns about that.
Okay.
So I would love to discuss that in further, but that's probably another discussion.
Thank you.
My understanding of that was not the intent, and that we were going to try and fix it. Yeah. But I thought we'd all talked about that. Maybe I'm imagining something different.
I would love to sit down and discuss in depth the 9 questions that I proposed about a month ago. Thank you.
Before Amanda, I got one more question for you, Mr. Burns.
Yes.
So I'm not sure, do you agree then with the whereas that was added that says assignments, transfers, and other routine personnel decisions made by management are not safety issues?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the actual content of the resolution, so I would reserve the right to look at it further at another point and weigh in, of course. But I think in essence, yes, if it's not a safety-related issue, the resolution helps protect the lives of firefighters and public safety officers.
So those aren't safety issues then?
Correct, other than the example that I gave you, that transfers, a one-person transfer to a station all by themselves is a safety component.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And then I guess I would elaborate, and I'm going to ask you the same thing, Robert. Elaborate and say, would you also agree that return to work is not a safety issue? I agree there's an issue about the coverage for an injury, but return to work itself is not a safety issue.
Right. As long as the doctor has, the appropriate doctor has approved that person to come back to work to do an assigned position, that in itself is not a safety concern. Now, our union would reserve the right if we make up new positions as a result of the return to work program. We feel like we should at least have that conversation, whether it's a bargaining or just a meeting that says, can we outline who qualifies for these positions and for how long and what would their pay be? We would like to have that discussion still.
If I can just make one observation, it's not a question. If the firefighters in Portland have watched this exchange, and from my experience, they probably are, they're quite pleased with your performance today, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent performance right out of the gate.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Fritz speaking for myself. Commissioner Adams, it's good to see you back. And I'm wondering, did you receive good nursing care while you were in the hospital?
I received excellent nursing care at Emmanuel Hospital. Yes.
That was the right answer.
I'm glad to hear it. That is the answer I was expecting. And one of the reasons is because the 2003 and 2005 legislatures passed House Bills 2800. They both happened to be 2800. Those acts required input of staff nurses in preparing hospital staffing plans. Safe staffing was one of the reasons for the Oregon Nurses Association's OHSU strike in 2001. My Strike Survivor t-shirt says, "Respect nurses." I'm asking you to respect your public safety staff. What are you afraid of? Public safety staff are not allowed to strike. This merely allows them to talk. From my observation, we don't have a problem with police and firefighters sitting around with too little to do. I've more often seen officers insist, oh no, I can do that by myself, and end up with on-the-job injuries. Trust your staff. This bill and this resolution allows them to participate in safe staffing discussions. What is so dangerous about that? Safe staffing affects citizens as well as officers. You do not want me as your nurse after 16 hours of working mandatory overtime. Neither do we as citizens want our officers having to work mandatory overtime when they don't feel safe to do so. Please pass this resolution.
Good morning, Council, Mayor. I'm Robert King. I'm the President of the Police Association. I am genuinely grateful to each of you that this discussion is playing out in the way that it is. Mayor, you routinely say that we'll often disagree and that we should do so respectfully. I value and appreciate the way that the dialogue unfolds among the five of you. As the officers, the 950 officers, sergeants, detectives, and criminalists that I represent are not always, you might know this, happy with the decisions that you arrive at. But what I respect and value is the way in which democracy and our government happens here in Portland. It's powerful to watch, and I think it leads us to a better product. And the reason I say that is because we're talking, I think for everybody in the room who's looking at this Senate bill or this issue, looks at it maybe from their perspective. The chief from hers, Yvonne from hers, the mayor from yours. I certainly have a unique view of it. I don't doubt that anybody here cares about our safety. I believe you as a council do. I believe that BHR does. I know that the chief cares about our safety. What I think is really unfortunate is I have to scold myself and probably everybody else that has anything to do with this. Since last week, I didn't make any effort to contact anybody. I didn't call the chief and try to sit down and talk with her about my concerns. Mayor, I didn't call you and suggest that I should talk with you about the concerns that I have. I didn't call BHR. Likewise, none of the people that I named called me. There was no discussion that unfolded over the week about this issue that brought the matter here before you today. I think that's unfortunate for a whole variety of different reasons. It's instructive to me. I hope I learned something from that and do a better job at communicating with all of you about an issue that's important like this in the future. Now, the other really important thing for me to say here today is that Senator Prozansky, we're talking about, I understand, two things. One's the resolution, the other's the Senate bill. On the Senate bill, Senator Prozansky made a suggestion or recommendation to the chiefs and to the Sheriff's Association that they eliminate potential and workload. The words potential and workload. I've heard a lot of the discussion here today focused on both of those words and the impact that it would have on the city and its operation. And yes, we, the sponsors of the bill, the Oregon Council of Police Associations, are willing to make those modifications to make Senate Bill 400 happen in the state of Oregon. So that, I think, is really unfortunate that the sheriffs and the chiefs said no in the same way you heard the chief say no here today. With respect to the resolution, I do not run the police bureau. I don't want to run the police bureau. It's clear that there are certain rights that are accorded to management, the transfer, for example, the assignment of work, the operation of the bureau, schedules. There's a whole host of things that under the law and under the current contract are not subject to the grievance procedure, and I don't want them to be. I just think that it's unfortunate that safety is as much of a concern to all of us as it is, and yet there's such a hindrance or a block to us having a conversation about it collectively that actually leads us to a compromise and a resolution that makes us safer, satisfies your concerns. I think that's the sort of the most disappointing thing about this whole process, and I appreciate Commissioner Sten's words and his leadership. And when I say leadership, you usually hear leadership used in a way that's patronizing to somebody because they've done what you wanted them to do. I think that leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they can tolerate or that they can absorb. And when I say that about Commissioner Sten, he's not giving me everything I want. He's not giving the fire union everything they want. He's not giving the city everything he wants. He's recognizing that we're in this situation together and that in all likelihood, yeah, the bill is going to pass. And that really, wouldn't it be better for all of us to work on language that fits better so that you have your concerns met and we have our concerns met? And at the end of the day, just so everybody in the room is clear, we've done a better job of protecting police officers and firefighters. We've done that together. And most importantly, we've done a good job of protecting our community, which is what our job is. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Burns. So the statement, assignments, transfers, and other routine personnel decisions made by management are not safety issues.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
I do.
And also return to work issues are not safety issues?
You know, Mayor, Commissioner Saltzman, I know and understand you have a focus and a concern on FPD&R. I've watched that play out over the last couple of years. I do not believe that this is a way in which we could raise issues about return to work. I do want you to know, in the same way that Ken has spelled out, that I have real concerns about the return to work program. Not that people are returned to work and that they have jobs and they're taken off of disability, but a couple of examples. One, the example that Ken mentioned, I really am concerned that the charter language for the city allows for the disability of the injured officer or firefighter to only, that the medical costs related to the disability to be paid for in their retirement only if they complete 30 years of service and they then retire. It's the only way in which that the back injury gets paid for. What's happened in the Fire Bureau and what's happened in the Police Bureau recently is people who have been off work for substantial periods of time have been forced back to work. One police officer, for example, has 29 years and some months service. He has a bad back, among other injuries, and he sent a letter by the Police Bureau telling him, get back to work. We're going to cut your disability benefits. You have to return to work. Well, if he retires, he loses out on the opportunity to have his back injury paid for, which I don't think is fair. And if he comes back to work, then he retires at 30 years, he's not on disability, and his insurance is likely not to cover a pre-existing work-related injury. So I think that's fundamentally wrong. I'd like to find a way for us to address that. And the other concern is that the political pressure that's being brought to FPD&R and to our disability system, I think, in some ways is merited and valuable. Given the recent ballot measure that passed, you see that there was community support for that. But there's one officer who is he's a pilot for the governor of Montana. He was injured, he was medically retired, he was disabled, and he was retrained as a pilot. And now he's being told by the city, he's relocated with his wife and family to Montana. Get back to Portland, we have a job for you. If you don't come back to work, we're going to cut your disability benefits. So he's having to choose between staying in Montana and flying for the governor of the state of Montana or returning to Portland, which, you know, as you can imagine, creates a whole host of problems for him and for his family. So, no, I don't think that Senate Bill 400 passed either in its current form or with the amendments that I've suggested is a way for us, an opportunity for us to raise concerns about the return to work program. I think that generally speaking, the return to work program is important and is positive, and it was really the failure of the past council that eliminated the desk positions, eliminated return to work. We've always been in support of that.
Thanks.
I want to ask you, Robert, as I did Ken, about the difference that you see between substantial and direct impact versus potential.
You know, as I said, Mayor, we're completely willing to take the word potential out of the law. We're completely willing to take the word potential out of the law itself. So I don't see where that's an issue really for us at all.
I mean, and to keep it as substantial and direct impact?
You know, this bill, one of the points that was made here today, I think, is really an important one. Direct and substantial, as you look back over the years and the arbitration awards that are there, or the bargaining that's happened, it doesn't allow us to talk about the issues that we face related to staffing and safety in the way we'd like to. So we've written this bill. This allows us to talk about safety, and it allows us to talk about staffing in a way that we think is more meaningful. And the real problem that I see happening, I think is really unfortunate, is that everybody is just fundamentally afraid that there'll be grievances, afraid there'll be bargaining, afraid that there will be ULPs. You know, we haven't used that process since 2004 in the contract talks because we weren't able to reach a settlement. We think often we'll be able to reach settlements. And it just provides a way for us to be able to talk about it in the law in the way that it isn't written today.
So I just wanted to, you mentioned, you know, and I appreciate the candor in saying that, you know, you were remiss in not picking up the phone last week, but nor did anybody else. So if people picked up their phones this week and we set this over 1 week, do you think we could come up with something that we could all support? I mean, I sense there might be that opportunity. I don't know how the sponsors feel about that, but just wanted to.
Well, since you asked, I don't feel real good about that because if this passes, what this does is create the forum to actually do what you want to do. I mean, I'm just really kind of taken back at the reaching for straws that is going on here to justify a no vote. This resolution creates the forum that you're asking for. This actually gives direction to us, I think, to sit down with the unions and say, okay, given that this resolution passed, what is the appropriate language for an amendment to Senate Bill 400 to allow this discussion to actually find itself into some balanced language that we can all support?
Well, and just so it's clear that Randy and I don't work in lockstep, if the members of the council that were, and I appreciate your passion, Commissioner Leonard, if the members of the council who are arguing against this resolution sincerely felt that something of the kind that I've been trying to articulate today, and apparently didn't do a great job last week articulating, had some promise, I would certainly be amenable to taking a week to see if we could get there, because I do think that whether or not we weigh in heavily in Salem can be debated. When we weigh in on a split voice, there's no doubt that we have virtually no impact.
Well, but that's, to me, an important consideration. But frankly, right now, we have a mayor who spent most of Monday and an entire bureaucracy that has spent the last 2 weeks focused on killing this bill in Salem. And that remains the policy of the city of Portland, that remains the policy of the city of Portland until this council acts in a deliberate way to change that. That's what we're doing here today.
I thought you said this resolution had nothing to do with 2404 or 400. Is that correct?
Mayor, what I said was the current policy of the city, as adopted in the legislative program, is to oppose any legislation, specifically 400. What this resolution says is that we will support it on the condition that any language in it that deals with transfers or workload be removed.
And it also could be read that we would continue to oppose it until that has changed. That section has changed.
Oh, of course, absolutely. That's okay. Well, thank you for finally getting that.
But quite frankly, Robert, I think you make a very compelling case. We could sit down, and I think what Commissioner Stinn said is, and if we have 5 folks voting for this, it has more impact in Salem than just a split vote. And I think that we're all been remiss in terms of not sitting down and talking about what we could do together to make this something that we could live with and that we could support. And I would commit the resources of my bureaus to work with you and the fire union and BOEC to come up with something that that we could write, and I don't know that we're too far off. I just think that it needs to be worked out, and I'm.
Well, what is that in this resolution that we're looking at that needs to be changed?
This makes no reference to the issue of potential versus direct or substantial. So I think that would be something worthy of discussion. Robert said he doesn't mind taking that out.
Well, if we're actually going to start a collaborative process around here, I'm all for it.
Good.
I've been waiting to see that happen. So if that happens in the next week, I'm on board. But that hasn't been my experience up till now. If that's what you're committing to, and we come back, committed to come back with another resolution, I'm fine with that. But excuse me for being a little bit skeptical that that's going to happen. But I'll give it a chance for a week if that's what I'm hearing. But to come back with an amendment to this resolution, not that we're going to blow this off and not do anything.
Well, and frankly, in the spirit of Mr. King's comments, diplomacy, which I appreciate, and I'm complimented that you believe I'm disappointing people at a reasonable rate. I think that's good. I actually know the context of that theory. I tend to agree with that. I could use another week to work with the League of Cities. Now, I think there's been some misunderstanding of my position in particular, and I also think that I think we are in a heated, and that's why I was kind of pushing on Yvonne. I think we're in a sort of, my analogy is an arbitration environment where you either get it all or you get nothing, and I think that particularly those folks who are against Senate Bill 400, I think would be well advised to try and change that dynamic, because I think they're likely to get nothing, is my read of the votes down there. So I think this is a good opportunity to actually, though they may not see it at this moment, help some of the other cities who don't have as much of the built-up relationship to show a different path. And so I could use a week to work with League of Cities on this.
But just so that I understand, Commissioner Steen, your idea then is to actually craft language that we would amend into this resolution that we would vote on a week from now.
Yes.
Okay. With the unions, BHR, a group that coming together that is committed, and I'm committing, as I think you would for BOEC, Commissioner Steen for Fire, to have those resources available to craft that kind of language to come back next.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be good if we could also see if there were ways that the LOC recommendation could be crafted into it as well, so that it meets a larger statewide interest as well.
Well, I'm
Mr. Mayor, could I comment briefly? Is it your impression right now that if one was in Salem, that they would have the impression that this city council opposes House Bill 400 currently?
Oh, they do.
We're on record as that.
Yeah, there's a.
Okay. I guess my request would be, if we're not able to craft a resolution today, is that there would be some neutral ground formed, because every day, every week that goes by with that, with the opposition, it will be more and more difficult to go back and stay neutral, or in fact actually craft language that everybody can accept. Right now, that would be my impression, that your personal or the commissioners weighing in opposing every day carries weight. And I agree we don't swing the whole state, but I think it's important, as when Robert and I speak, that we're speaking for a unified group. And so that would be my only concern, is that it sits for a week when it sounds like we might even be neutral and we're working on something, but in the meantime we're opposed to it. I just want to know if that can be communicated.
Well, actually, it's been communicated by various people on this council. So,
well,
but the point, let me finish. The point is that rather than talking about who is opposing it and who is supporting it, what I heard Robert saying is that we're going to try to find that middle ground over the next week. So that's not the issue. And I doubt very much that this is going to be voted on in the next week. There's a lot of stuff to be done yet. So I think that by doing this, we may eliminate sort of the both ends of the spectrum and find that sweet spot in the middle that everybody can live with, because it does protect the officers, it does protect the cities, and that it does so in a manner that moves forward our common agendas. And that's what I want.
Are you willing to let our lobbyists in Salem know that they should stay out of the discussion on this until we resolve it?
Yes.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, just to stay out of the discussion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that fair?
Motion to set it over? Or? Take it back to your office.
No, I would just ask that we set this over until its regular and proper place on Wednesday's calendar following.
But I also would like us then to meet immediately after this adjournment to at least figure out how we're going to get the group together, who will be the group to move this forward.
And since you mentioned that, I really don't think it's appropriate for us to have a member of the League of Oregon Cities in a discussion that this city is having as its own sovereign municipality about its policy with respect to this issue.
Are you saying you want to exclude Commissioner Sten?
No, you said that you wanted to adopt some League of Oregon City language.
No, he's a member of the League of Oregon Cities, as I am, and that what he was saying is that they're crafting some legislation. By him having that connection is what I understood.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting they be on our work group.
No.
I'm suggesting that I need a little more time
to talk with them
about what their intention is.
And I heard that, but I heard you say that there was something you wanted from them that would be
through Commissioner Sten.
Okay,
So our president is Bob Austin, who's the mayor of Escalade, and I've been talking yesterday and all morning, and we may end up differing from the league position. There's no doubt about that, in the sense that we may not, but the very small cities don't have the mechanisms we have to work with their unions, and it's just a very different dynamic. And so they may ultimately take a position that they want no change in the law. That would not surprise me. On the other hand, they understand that this thing is from their point of view precariously close to passing, and I've been kind of putting forward to them that while the dynamics are different in Portland, some of our council may have some different views on this legislation, I think we might be able to help craft an outcome that's better for everybody, and they certainly are hearing that.
I appreciate that.
And where that leads them in terms of the League of Cities position, I'm just not sure.
Okay.
It's a pretty heated issue at that board.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I just want to make a few comments, and I appreciate the effort, and then I will have involvement and my staff involved in the efforts over the next week to come up with an alternative. But I do support, given the fact that, as Amanda mentioned, that public safety workers do not have the ability to strike, I do support the direction and this resolution as written, allowing them to bring public safety issues and potential public safety issues to the bargaining table. And I do so from my inside point of view for 11 years as chief of staff to the former police commissioner, where there were issues that were in the environment that were public safety, worker-related safety issues that were not part of the bargaining process, but were definitely in the environment. We have, I think it's kind of ironic for this discussion, I mean, we have a mayor who is aggressively pursuing the necessary technology upgrades in 800 megahertz and other technology issues that have been real public safety issues for officers for a long time. And you're addressing those, Mayor, and it's your leadership and your work as the commissioner in charge. But those issues have been around for a number of years. Commissioner Leonard has been very aggressive in seeking the necessary upgrades at BOAC that have hindered or put at risk public safety workers in this city. I think those issues would have been dealt with quicker by previous councils, sooner by previous councils, if this safety was an allowable bargaining topic. So I'm supporting this because from my inside view of 11 years working on these issues with the former police commissioner, I like the fact that this resolution is narrowly tailored to the safety issues, and I think it's the appropriate position of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, very much for coming out. Is that all the folks who are signed up?
That was all who signed up.
I think we have set it over. Do we have to take a formal? Do
we have to
vote to set it over for a week, Carla?
Pardon? Motion? Okay. Do
I'd
I hear a motion?
Move to postpone till next Wednesday's regular calendar.
Second.
Call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Please read the next item.
Item 157, declare the City of Portland's support of Portland Development Commission employee efforts to organize.
You have an amendment.
Yes.
Would you like to do the amendment before any remarks are made?
Yes, thank you. In order to do that, I have to hand you the gavel. You're going to take care of it, aren't you?
I can rule you out of order pretty quick now, and I think I also have the authority to remove you if you don't control yourself. So be careful.
You're talking to him or me?
Well, all of
somebody
you,
in the room. Could you? I think that this resolution, or amendment, excuse me, has been discussed with each of your staffs.
Yes.
And it says, declare the City of Portland support of Portland Development Commission employees' right to organize if they choose. And that was the major point for me. It was sort of the neutrality of this, is that if that's their choice, then we support that. And that's the purpose of this particular motion. And I move to amend the language to include this amendment.
There's a second.
Discussion?
There's a second.
Second.
Oh, excuse me.
Well, from my view, your language clarifies what I think is implicit in what I originally drafted with Commissioner Sten, so I think it's absolutely fine.
Other discussion?
Yeah, as the co-sponsor of this resolution, I have no objection to the amendment.
Further discussion?
I had an amendment I wanted to offer as well.
Do you want to do that before this one is adopted?
Oh, no.
Okay. Can we call the roll on this amendment?
Roll, please.
Adams?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye. Passes.
Oh, Commissioner.
Okay. That was a peaceful transition of power.
Very impressive.
The last time that'll be seen.
Well, I offer this amendment, having just served with Commissioner Sten for the last month or so, along with PDC Commissioners Rosenbaum and Will Hoyt, and then our citizen member John Cruz, going through the PDC's budget, urban renewal area by urban renewal area, hearing from a lot of the employees. I think, I'm concerned that there's a lot of great.
Excuse me, do you have a copy of the amendment we can look at?
Well, I was going to read it. It's just pretty quick.
Could you read it first so we can
have
that in our heads as we listen to your very fine words?
Be it further resolved that the Portland City Council expresses its deep appreciation for the work that all the individuals at PDC do on behalf of the citizens of Portland.
That's very controversial.
Is that to replace the existing language?
No, just to be added as a further resolve. It's a substitute, yeah.
Second.
No, I just think, I think we all appreciate the work and realize there's a lot of talented employees at PDC. And I think we also all realize, for a variety of reasons, there's a lot of mixed messages in the media these days about the caliber of the work that the PDC is doing. And I just think this council should go on record as stating we do appreciate the work it does. We may have different opinions about, who should have ultimate budget authority and things like that. But the work they do is high caliber, and this resolve simply says that.
Support that.
Second.
Call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye.
Okay. Maybe I can just give some explanation as to, with those amendments now in place, I don't think they really change at all the substance of what Commissioner Sten and I drafted. Of course, most of us are aware of and I do characterize what has happened at PDC as a transition, and I think it's actually a healthy transition. I would disagree with those who have interpreted some of what has been said in here in general, but specifically by me, as attempts to undermine the goals of the agency. I couldn't disagree more. I actually very much, in my whole actually political career, have been a strong proponent of economic development initiatives. In Salem, I oftentimes supported economic development initiatives that other Democrats didn't. And I did because I do connect that doing smart things with tax dollars and property creates good family wage jobs and creates a better, in this case, city for all of us. So my efforts at the PDC or with the PDC have been to create a path upon which it can be the agency that I think Portlanders want it to be. And I fear that it is not that now. One of the, I think, actually signs of health restoring itself to that agency is that now the workers want to collectively organize. I have been disappointed to read and hear criticisms that the attempt to unionize the workforce is in fact one more symptom of the lack of direction of the PDC and one more symptom of the failure of management to be able to control its destiny. That's offensive to workers, and it is offensive to those who believe, as I do, that people are not products, but are people whose labors should be respected and thus should have the right to have somebody speak for them with their employer about their issues. That's what I believe is a fundamental right of all employees. I actually think it's healthy when we get to the place that an organization is asking questions of itself internally and challenging decisions that are being made in a productive way, not a destructive way. There's a fine line. I would agree with anyone about that. But what I'm hearing to happen at the agency is not destructive and not, I think, demeaning to the mission of the Portland Development Commission, but rather a healthy sign of growth. And what I think we'll finally see here in a short period of time, meaning the next year or two, the arrival of an agency that balances the interest of economic development with the poorest communities in Portland, with the people that work for it, with the goals of the city council. And all of those things aren't happening right now. And when those do happen, I think we'll find that they're not at odds with each other, but actually much like pistons in an engine that fire systematically, in a coordinated fashion, that working together creates more horsepower than if one of the pistons isn't firing or the spark plug is unplugged. That's how I view the agency today. So I think this effort by the council to recognize, and I want you to know that I also spoke with the executive director about this and suggested to him that versus kind of the traditional adversarial approach that is taken from management to employees to unionize, to do something different, to actually go to the employees and say, I've rethought the position that I have taken. And I actually think it's a healthy thing for you, the workforce, to organize. And I not only support it, I want to help facilitate it. I want to begin by starting off on the right foot and having us organize labor management committees, which have successfully turned around the Bureau of Development Services in this city. I just honestly and earnestly believe that if PDC adopted some of those strategies we used at the Portland Development or at the Bureau of Development Services, it would have similar results. So I appreciate the ability to have this discussion today, and hope the council can support this. Thank you.
Do we have a sign-up sheet?
We did. No one signed up.
Okay. Please call the vote. Further discussion? Please call the vote.
Adams?
Well, I want to thank Commissioner Leonard for bringing this forward because it gives me the opportunity to reiterate what is a central and core value for me and to reiterate the fact, my values, that it is the nation's workers anywhere right to organize themselves or to seek to organize themselves. That is a fundamental right of this nation, one that I support, not just in the private sector, not just in other public agencies or organizations, but in our own. I would just also use this as an opportunity to underscore two other sort of related issues in our own house, and that is we continue to employ seasonal workers in the city of Portland that have, I believe, inadequate access to health care. I voted against the last renewal that came forward as a protest vote for that. And I just want to reiterate to our staff that's listening that we need to move on that. It doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily asking for it, nor does it necessarily mean they have the same package as every other worker and full-time worker in the city. But I have seasonal workers in my bureau. The bureaus, there are other seasonal workers, and we need to do something that is equitable for them. And the other issue is that over the years there has been creeping non-represented, how would I say, there's been a sort of a creeping designation of non-represented employees in the city that I believe indeed should be allowed to consider being part of organized labor bargaining units. And we need to be honest with ourselves about that issue as well. So I'm going to support this, using it as an opportunity as well to thank the folks at PDC for being responsive to our concerns. Our concerns have been well-intentioned, and we appreciate those that have been willing to work with us on those concerns. Aye.
Leonard?
Well, I apparently overestimated what I thought was going to be happening here today. I thought we would have quite a lively discussion, and I'm pleasantly taken back that that's not happening. I actually appreciate that. So I do want to kind of springboard off what Commissioner Adams and say that there have been some who have communicated to me that some of the criticisms I've made may have been criticisms that the frontline staff have thought I was making of them, and that I just want to be able to say, because I hope that if they're not listening, maybe at some point they will hear that nothing can be further from the truth. I have as many opportunities as I've been able to take said how great my relationship has been with frontline staff people, and very specifically on this initiative to bring a biodiesel industry to Portland. And I've worked very closely with them over the last 18 months or so on very specific efforts to do that, and I cannot be more impressed with the work that the staff has done, with the knowledge that they bring to me and the folks that we have been talking with that are interested in creating what ends up being a huge tax base here in Portland, and family wage jobs that I think we're going to see occur very soon as a result of this excellent work that PDC has done in working with us in bringing some cutting-edge technology that will produce biofuels for not just local use, but actually to be an export product that will be exported from the Port of Portland to points, as I've said here before, around not only the United States, but the Western Hemisphere. So I just want to make it really clear that I am a strong defender of their good work. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, this council in January of 2003 passed a resolution supporting union organizing and collective bargaining. In March of 2005, we declared our support for workers' freedom to form unions and urged Congress to pass the Employee Free Choice Act. So I see this resolution that we're passing today as amended is entirely consistent with the position I think each one of us shares individually, but we've also expressed collectively as a council of workers' rights to organize, unfettered from campaigns against those by management. So I think that the resolution has ended in a good place, landed in a good place, and it truly does make this, put this council on record in saying to the employees, exercise your right to choose. And I know, as we all stated too, we have a lot of respect for the caliber of the employees there. They're very talented individuals, and I'm sure they're more than capable of deciding whether joining a union or not is in their best interest. So I look forward to finding out what the results are when that election happens, but this is a good resolution. Aye.
Stan?
Well, I appreciate all the comments. I've worked closely with PDC for a decade and a half, and as anybody would probably agree, I think PDC has been extraordinarily pivotal in the shaping of our city. Many of the good things people talk about and identify with Portland, they had a major hand in. They also have, in years that precede, I think probably everybody that works there, been a very destructive force in Portland. The current charter was used to clear out vacant land around Emmanuel Hospital. It's still vacant and bothers people to this date. And so it's like anything. It can be good or bad. And I think we have terrific employees there who have been doing a very good job, and I very much appreciate Commissioner Saltzman's language to make that clear. I also believe that it's a time of change and that the agency that was set up in the 50s will not be successful until it revamps itself. And my push and at times criticisms and challenges to the agency are based on a notion that I think Portland's future is tied to the future of the Portland Development Commission, and I don't think as it stands right now it's ready for that task. And I think it's time to keep pushing harder, but collectively, hopefully with some humbleness that we don't any of us have all the answers. The way I originally wrote this resolution was I believe that employees should organize. As I look at the turnover that's there, I look at the issues, as I talk with people both confidentially and on the record, I hear a sense that they need a clearer voice. And so I certainly didn't have any problem with the mayor amending this to say exercise your right, and if they choose not to organize, I stand completely by that. But my personal opinion is that actually, having worked with many large agencies, I actually find it easier to make significant cultural change when the employees are able to negotiate through representatives and have that ability to make changes and not feel that if they go out there on a limb, they're going to be the one that gets axed for it. So I think when you look at an agency that we desperately need, that has done terrific work but needs to go through cultural change, having the employees represented, I think, is a good step. And so, I agree with the council taking the right position. I'm just giving my own personal view on it as in addition to the council's point of view. And I look forward to PDC continuing through this and becoming an agency that can be successful throughout the city, that can work to do affordable housing, that they're doing very well right now in addition to redevelopment, and can change, I think, from a sort of traditional view of economic development, which is essentially bricks and mortars in the central city, to one that's more current in a world where capital is moving and workers have more choices, and we need to be more engaged in creative activities. And I think this agency is moving in the right direction, and I think it's been tough. And I think that this step could potentially, if it's done right, and if the employees choose, help the agency get where it needs to go. Aye.
Potter.
One of the interesting things about this council is that we tend to see all the problems that other folks don't resolve, and they eventually come to us for resolution. And thus, I think often it's perceived in the public's mind that when we're dealing with these issues, that it's only the problems that comprise an agency or bureau of the city. And that I've been guilty myself of not balancing out the fact of all the good work that PDC does with the issues and problems that we know that they're struggling with, and that our commitment is to help them get through that and be a better agency as the result. So I really appreciate Commissioner Saltzman, you adding the part about the good work, and your comments, Commissioner Stin and Leonard, about what this organization does, because they do much good work, and I think that has to be recognized. But it is also recognized, as Commissioner Stin has said, we don't have all the answers, but we know what we want to work towards, and this is part of that process, is working towards an organization that's not only transparent, but it helps engage its own employees in making better decisions. So I support this, and I look forward to working with PDC on whatever the result of the vote is on whether to unionize or not. And I think that this was a good resolution. I vote aye. Please read the next item.
Item 158, amend contract with Skyward Construction, Inc. to provide additional services for facility improvements at Union Station.
Mayor Potter, City Council members, I am Jim Coker, Project Manager with the Office of Management Finance Facility Services. This ordinance is for emergency structural repairs that were required as part of the Union Station Facilities Improvement Project. In August of last year, Skyward Construction was authorized to proceed with the construction phase of this project, which includes re-roofing the baggage claim area, masonry repairs, and historic door replacements and repairs. Construction began in September of last year. When the roof sheathing was removed over the baggage claim area in early December, we found a number of broken and cracked joists, and we found that one of the 4 large skylights had collapsed by about 4 inches due to significant joist failures. In December 12th, Dean Kolb Engineers, the structural engineers on the project, issued a letter designating the roof as a dangerous structure as defined by city code. When the situation was discovered, a major part of the roof was demolished and was being temporarily protected with plastic sheeting from the rain. Skyward Construction was able to minimize some of the rain infiltration into the baggage claim area, but rain still got in and affected Amtrak's operations. Also, Dean Kolb Engineers required that we install temporary shoring within the baggage claim area to support the structure while we were doing the structural repairs, which also impacted Amtrak's operations. Because of these issues, we designated the repairs as an emergency, and we directed Dean Kolb Engineers to proceed with their redesign. Given the attached ordinance, which includes change order number 2, is for all those structural repairs that are now done and totals just under $288,000. With the first change order, which was slightly under $20,000, we are now 37% over the original contract of $832,000. This is a federally funded project through the Oregon Department of Transportation's Transportation Enhancement Grant Project. Because of that, ODOT will provide 50% of the additional funds, or approximately $143,000. PDC is also providing slightly less than 9% of the funds for the construction phase, which for this change order will be about $24,000. The additional 41%, or slightly under $120,000, will come from available Union Station operational funds. Also, as part of this ordinance, the overall project is now about 60% complete, and we do expect, because we're still fairly early in the construction phase, to incur additional costs due to unforeseen conditions. To keep the project progressing in a timely manner, we are requesting authority to expend an additional 10%, or $83,200 of the original contract amount, to account for those future potential changes. As a final note, an amendment to the contract with Architectural Resources Group, which is the prime consultant, professional services consultant under the contract, will be filed as an ordinance in the near future for the additional structural engineering work that was required. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Thank you. Anybody to sign up to testify?
No one signed up.
Okay. Please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Please read item 159.
Authorized revenue bonds to finance the Enterprise Business Solution Project.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Eric Johansson, Debt Manager in the Office of Management and Finance. Today's proposed ordinance authorizes the issuance of $9.1 million of additional bonds to complete the funding of the city's Enterprise Business Solution Project. You may recall in December of 2004, council approved a previous ordinance that authorized $14 million of funding for the project. Today's proposed ordinance, together with the December 2004 ordinance, will authorize the issuance of up to $23.1 million in limited tax revenue bonds for the project. The source of repayment of the bonds, as well as for the $4.8 million in costs that will not be debt financed, is expected to come from annual Bureau contributions in the amount of $3.4 million per year. Finally, as required by the Uniform Revenue Bond Act, today's council action authorizing the additional borrowing must be done as a non-emergency ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think I have questions for Jennifer, if you'd stick around, though.
Where do you stand on unionization? Just kidding.
So when you came before us in December 8th of 04, and we approved ordinance number 178947, the cost for the project was what amount?
$14 million was the estimate in 2004.
Okay, and the cost of the project, I guess maybe I wasn't around then. Was I around then? 04? No.
Did you tell him where he was?
Yeah.
Spiritually or physically?
No, I wasn't in the office.
Let me check my GPS.
So I said us. I should have said the city council. And what is the estimated cost of the project now?
The current project budget is $27.9 million.
Okay. And you were before us at one point with this project, if I do recall correctly. It might not have been December 8th when I was sitting here, but you did sit before us and discuss this project and the reason for the cost increases, correct?
Yes, in October when we had the Ariston implementing contract before you, I reviewed with you the budget at that time, and you asked me about the confidence level, and I told you that it was high.
Okay. And so since that October, it has gone up to 27.9?
It was 27.9 when we met in October and approved that contract, and it has not changed. What has happened is we got an authorization in 04 for $14 million for bonds. Since that time, as we developed the project and refined the costs, the project budget has been set before we went into implementing it at 27.9. This resolution or ordinance actually would authorize us to issue $23.1 million of bonds, the balance of the project budget unchanged from when we were before you before, to be paid from cash. We're well into the project now. We had our official kickoff for it in the first part of December, and we're almost through with the blueprinting phase for the finance track, and we're going to be live in November. So we're still on budget and on track with the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Other questions? Thank you, folks. Is there a sign-up sheet on this?
I did not have one.
Anybody here who wishes to discuss this issue? It's a non-emergency and moves to a second reading. The next two items, item 160 and 161, Commissioner Adams has requested they be pulled back to his office until next week.
If I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm still getting up to speed here. Do both of them come back or just 160? Sorry, I misspoke. 160 comes back, and if we could consider 161. Thanks, Vicki.
Hearing no objection.
Can I make a statement on 160? Because when it does come back, I want to know that TriMet and Metro are in full support of 160. I've heard some concerns to the contrary.
That's why I'm pulling it back to my office.
Okay.
You should read it into the record first.
We couldn't get him here today.
What did you say?
I should read it into the record. Item 160, support the Portland to Milwaukee Light Rail Project and the Portland Streetcar Loop Project and seek funding commitments from the Oregon State Legislature.
Okay, hearing no objection. Please read the item 161.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon for preparation and submittal of a small starts project development application for the Portland Streetcar Loop Project.
Commissioner Adams.
So this is the official application that we're making to seek the federal funding for streetcar loop to OMSI. It is a request of $75 million. It is now called the Portland Streetcar Loop Project, formerly known as the East Side Streetcar Project. And it is in cooperation and with the support of Metro and with TriMet. And we have Vicki here if you have any questions.
Questions from the commissioners? This is an emergency vote. Please call the vote. Is there anybody signed up to testify on this?
I did not have a sign-up sheet.
Anybody here who wishes to testify on this matter? Please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Please read item 162.
Authorize an agreement with American Specialty Health Networks, Inc. for the East Portland Community Center, Matt Dishman Community Center, Mount Scott Community Center, Southwest Community Center, and University Park Community Center to promote the use of Portland Parks and Recreation fitness facilities to seniors.
Mr. Saltzman?
I thought this was a second reading, but I guess, because I know we talked about this.
That's
Oh,
the
okay.
other one, 163.
Right. Well, this is something that provides, let me see here.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It should pass.
It helps provide,
It should pass.
helps make our park facility, fitness facilities available to seniors. It's a good thing.
I'm all for it. I don't care what Randy says. I'm all for it.
Is there anybody signed up to testify?
I didn't have a sign-up sheet.
Is there anybody here who wishes to testify on this matter? It's emergency vote. Please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Please read item 163.
Authorize a facility use agreement with the African American Health Coalition for Matt Dishman Community Center, University Park Community Center, and Columbia Pool.
Second reading vote only. Please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Also a good thing. Aye.
Sten? Potter?
Aye. Please read item 164, second reading.
Authorize a license agreement with the State of Oregon on behalf of Portland State University to develop, manage, and operate a food-based educational gardening program on Portland Parks and Recreation Green Thumb property.
Second reading vote only. Please call the vote.
Adams?
Aye.
Leonard?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Sten?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye. Recess until 6 p.m.